Now, typically when you think of something like a mid-league buff, you would think, well, they went out of their way to try to make sure that some ability was better, but GGG really doesn't do that, and that's the case here as well. This is a bug fix. However, it's a relatively impactful bug fix. Now, as you might know about the Blazing Salvo ability, it is a projectile, and projectiles, when you use it with things like Sniper's Mark, they can split. And when projectiles split with Sniper's Mark, most of the time they go out, hit a couple of times, and if you have some source of return, meaning things like Nemus, they will return back. And Blazing Salvo was supposed to have it so that the projectiles would split, they would hit, return, and hit again, but that wasn't the case. Blazing Salvo, whenever the projectile had split and then returned, kind of just shot the projectiles off into the distance. However, now we have this line in the new patch notes that says, fixed a bug that caused Blazing Salvo projectiles that have both split and returned to you to fly much further away than they should. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Big Ducks, that's probably not actually that big of a buff, right? Well, in the case that you are using Nemus and you are using Sniper's Mark, this equates to roughly 4 to 5 additional projectile hits for every single time you cast. And previously, you could maybe hit about 20-ish projectiles every single time you cast. So if you're adding about 5 projectiles, that's a 25% increased amount of damage. That's pretty sizable. Now, yes, it does require Nemus as well as Sniper's Mark. However, if you're playing Blazing Salvo, you're probably using those two things anyways. So that got me thinking a little bit. You might remember that recently I made the Blood Magic Firestorm Inquisitor build, and I said in that video that it was meant to just kind of be a template. You can play other abilities with it. One of the ones that I mentioned was Body Swap. However, Blazing Salvo works perfectly fine as well. And I kind of want to go over some of my findings, as well as I'll show you what I mean by the fix where the projectiles flew all the way out, and I'll show you a couple other things as well. So if you're new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. Now, when it comes to how this ability functioned previously, the only good video I could find of this was by Jorgen. It's he made a Nemus Blazing Salvo Inquisitor, completely different setup than mine, but it will show you what I'm talking about with how the projectiles used to work. So as you can see, some of the projectiles when he's casting, even though he's casting a lot less than I am, you'll see him kind of just fly off into the distance and not do anything, right? Those projectiles are just completely wasted. Whereas you'll see as I explain, the things that are going on and show you in an Uber Shaper and stuff like that, you'll see that those projectiles don't do that anymore. They all stay in the same place, which is that probably 16 to 20% overall damage buff that I was talking about. Right, so I want to preface this by saying that this character is not finalized with Blazing Salvo in any way. I kind of just moved a few pieces of gear around, crudely changed the skill tree a tiny bit to fit what I'm doing here. So this is not a representation of how good the build could potentially be with Blazing Salvo. However, I kind of wanted to have something to at least show you what I was working on. So when it comes to Blazing Salvo, and when it comes to using it with returning projectiles, the way that it works is that it will fire out a set of projectiles, and those projectiles will hit the ground and then return to you and hit the ground again. So if you cast this very close to your character, you'll notice that it just has a bunch of crazy overlapping projectiles. Now, not all of these are hitting, but I'd probably say 80 to 85% of them are hitting. Maybe 3 or 4 from each cast are not actually hitting. That's out of 25 or so though. However, one interesting thing about Blazing Salvo in particular is that while it does do this overlap here, if you move the mouse out, it starts to clear the entire screen instead of just that little area around you. So if you do happen to be in a map that isn't crazy difficult to kill enemies, you can have some pretty insane coverage of damage just by, casting your Blazing Salvo every once in a while and essentially covering the entire screen. Now, we are using Intensify here, and we are using Pinpoint support now, but this is pretty significant, right? This is a significant amount of overlap. So I'll quickly show you what this ability is capable of. We'll do an Uber Shaper. That's kind of just what I've been doing recently. Whenever I'm testing builds and such, is I kind of just jump into Uber Shaper real quick. Now, as I said, the build's not completely together, but you will see that compared to Firestorm, damage-wise, I think this is doing quite a bit more damage. Now, it is a little bit different in the sense that you can't really do your full single target damage from range, which isn't a huge deal for this build because it is quite tanky. With the setup that I currently have right now, I am not as tanky as I'd like to be, specifically because I did have to swap a ring out for Nemus, and I am still using Replica Dragonfang's Flight. I have not crafted the other amulet for it yet, so I'm missing a lot of health. You might notice that my health is like 8,300, where it was well over 9,000, I think, in my previous videos, so my health is a lot lower, so my effective health pool is cut quite a bit short. However, that's something that can be fixed with swapping around to the proper gear. And as you can kind of see, even with that, the damage is still quite good. So let's go ahead and jump to Shaper. So now with Blazing Salvo and us hitting so many times, although we do have to be quite a bit closer to the boss, our damage, in my opinion, and according to POB, is significantly higher. Now, as for exactly how much damage that is, I'm not exactly sure yet, and I do have to be a little bit more careful because my effective health pool is quite a bit lower since I haven't fixed the build, so I don't really want to just be like standing inside of Shaper balls and taking them to the face, because that will still kill me if I get hit by like 5 of them or something like that. Oh, that wasn't good. But either way, the damage is quite a bit better when I actually have everything going. Now, unfortunately, Shaper has like, you know, all kinds of horrible damage reduction because GGG was not happy that people, you know, busted their boss and killed it instantly and skipped phases. I kind of wish at some point that they'd remove that, but, you know, it is what it is. Unfortunately, you can't just like insta-gib uber bosses with tons of damage unless you really have tons of damage. But damage-wise, still quite a bit better in my opinion than even what we had. I'm dead. Oh, maybe I'm not. Interesting. All right, let's get some damage going. So as you can see, when I actually got some good damage there, significantly higher than what it was before. One other big bonus here when we are using Blazing Salvo compared to something like Firestorm is that we're hitting a ton of times now. What that means is that even though this build has significant recovery, right? Like we've got a ton of life gain per second. Now that we're hitting, I don't know, probably over 100 times a second, we can use life gain on hit. Meaning you could either use like some influence rings that have life gain on spell hit, or you could use the Watcher's Eye mod that gives you up to 30 life gain per hit whenever you have Vitality on. And it just so happens that that is the Watcher's Eye that I purchased. So 28 life per hit when you're affected by Vitality. So we're gaining like an additional probably 3,000 or 4,000 recovery per second of life. And if you wanted to get some like energy shields on hit, there's a couple different ways that you can get that in the game. You could probably get even more than that as well. However, this opens up the question of like what other spells, you know, would be better with this setup. The original reason that I did Firestorm is because I think Firestorm at a full budget level is still the ideal setup, right? Because Nemus easily gets up to like 15-20 Divine most of the time, and you don't need that for Firestorm. However, you do need it for like Blazing Salvo and a couple other ideas that I've got. However, I'm not fully sold on the other ideas yet, but yeah, I mean, big damage. So I'll also show you guys the random maps you can kind of get an idea of how it clears. I am not going to make this like a build guide or anything right here. We're not going to have, I guess I have a Dunes in my inventory. I'm not going to do like a POB or anything in this particular video because I want to spend a little bit of time and get it together and make sure that it's actually correct. This is going to be Enfeeble. Oh, it's Cannot Leech. I don't want to do Cannot Leech. Withered is kind of bad. Stealing my charges is kind of bad. Extra damage is Chaos. Projectiles. Yeah, it's pretty terrible. Let's do it. Do I have any bad Jewelers? Or okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So 80% Delirious, a bunch of annoying mods. Let's see how clearing an 80% Delirious map does with Blazing Salvo. So this should be like significantly better clear-wise. Oh, Kosis with additional projectiles? Uh-oh. All right, let's see. Yeah, so he still dies super quick, even though I think I was getting stunned there. But yeah, okay, so the clear is significantly better, right? Like we don't have to worry as much about, you know, just hitting little tiny zones at any given time. You don't need to gem swap. It just kind of works. You can still do really good single target damage even though you've got your clear in. Obviously a significantly better spell. It just requires like a 20+ Divine Ring because, you know, Nemus is popular again this league. So more money. However, we're at that point in the league where most people are probably very, very wealthy, or they are, you know, like they already have a Nemus or something like that, most likely. Oh, I don't have I don't have Righteous Fire on. No wonder I haven't been doing enough damage. I was like, why is my damage so low in this map? It should have been way higher. Yeah, I didn't have Righteous Fire on, so fortunately you didn't get to see either of the bosses with Righteous Fire, but yeah, the rest of the enemies dying quite quickly. So clear's better, single target's better, a little bit less tanky because I haven't fully changed the setup, but I should be able to fix that in the probably upcoming video that I'll make about this. But yeah, Blazing Salvo got a pretty massive buff. And that is going to be it for the video. Look forward to most likely like an update build guide kind of video. I don't know exactly how in-depth I'll go with that one because it's basically the same as my previous video, but look forward to that sometime over the course of this week. I'll get it together, get the POV together, do a little bit of work on it, as well as potentially some other builds with the same exact setup, but I need to do a little bit more work before we talk about those. So remember, boys, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class, and I'll see you guys in the next video.